Hello everyone, Rurikhan here coming at you with another First Impressions video, and today we're going to be taking a look at Beyond Two Souls. Now, I actually received a special edition review copy from Sony Computer Entertainment Portugal, of which only 2,900 were made. I was kind of surprised by that, but it was really cool. It came with this book with a making of and some text by David Cage, and it was kind of cool to go over all that stuff. And after that, basically, I delved into the game and I started playing it. It was my very first Quantic Dream title ever, because I never really played Heavy Rain or any other of the Quantic Dream titles. So I was really curious because I had heard all this stuff about Heavy Rain and how amazing it was. And you guys know that I was excited when I was at the press presentation for Beyond Two Souls. And so I basically delved into the game. I've played for a couple of hours, and then I replayed some of the chapters to check out the different outcomes. And to be completely honest, I would not necessarily advise this to everyone, because I have to say it kind of spoils the experience a little bit. It's weird, but David Cage has actually said in some event, I think it was at the festival. What was that festival that they were at? They were at this film festival that I forget the name now, but basically, at that festival, David Cage even said that you should just play Beyond Two Souls one time and never play it again. And I kind of tend to agree with that, because the thing is, when you play it one time, you don't really understand all the stuff that's going on behind the curtain, so the experience is very magical. And when you go back and play everything again, you kind of start to see how each thing is made. And I do have to agree with the fact that it does spoil a little bit of the magic. You start taking a peek behind the curtain a little bit. At least that's my opinion. But either way, it was still a great experience up until this point. I haven't finished the game yet, but I definitely plan to, because it has definitely got its hooks on me really bad. Now, this particular video, as you guys might have noticed by now, is actually post-commentary, and the reason for that is just there's simply too much dialogue going on in the game, and it would be just you guys watching the game and not really me giving you my opinion on the game if I was to actually record and do live commentary. Not to mention that there would probably be a whole bunch of spoilers, which is something very important about this game, because if I'm to be completely honest with you guys, in order to do the interview that I did for Beyond Two Souls, I had to do some research online, and while I was researching, I came upon a gameplay video of the homeless section of the game, and it was like, I don't know, maybe 15 minutes of gameplay or whatever. It completely spoiled that portion of the game for me. Like, I was expecting it to be a little bit different. No, that video was either leaked or something, or I don't know, because it just basically spoiled that whole level for me. I was a little bit disappointed with that. But either way, that is actually an advice I have to give you guys as well. If you're considering buying Beyond Two Souls, I would not necessarily advise you to go and look up gameplay, because you might just get yourself spoiled. Just watch a little bit of gameplay wherever, but don't watch too much of it, because, yeah, that'll actually kind of ruin the experience a little bit. At least that's what happened with me. Either way, one of the most important things about Beyond Two Souls is obviously its story. This is a very story-driven game, a very narrative-driven game, so I thought it would only be adequate for me to bring up story as the very first point for this video. So far, as a frame of reference, I've played up until the Navajo section, which to those of you who have not played Beyond Two Souls is not really much of a reference, but it's like, I don't know, it's maybe 4 hours into the game, maybe less. I'm not exactly sure. It might be 4 or 5 hours in the game, something like that. And so far, it's been very solid in terms of story. I've been enjoying it immensely when story is concerned. The plot, I'm going to tell you guys a little bit of the plot, but I can't give too much away because, like I said, there's a big deal about this game in spoilers, in my opinion. And the fact of the matter is, the more you will know about the story, the less the game is a really good experience for you. Because, again, I cannot stress this enough. Story is the main thing about this game. But anyways, the plot basically revolves around the character of Jodie Holmes, who is a young girl, teenager, or woman, and I say this because you will experience several points in her life. and she is somehow connected to a supernatural entity who is called Aiden. And I thought that this pronunciation was weird. I thought that because the name is basically Aiden, I thought it would be Aiden, but it's Aiden. I don't know. Me and English, sometimes we don't get along that well. But either way, you're going to be experiencing several moments throughout 15 years of life in this character. So you will experience her as a little girl, as a rebellious teenager, as a full adult woman. You will experience a lot of moments and a lot of it's almost like it's different characters. It's going to be the same character, and you will notice like a lot of things in common, obviously, but you will also notice that it's almost like she has very different personalities as she grows up, which is very, very interesting. The story is also not really told in chronological order, and I know that this puts some people off, but to be completely honest, you will get a better experience this way, because I've noticed that like when you're experiencing, for instance, the very early stage, when she is a very young girl, when you're experiencing that portion of the game, I noticed that it actually took place in kind of the same familiar setting a lot of the times in the little that I've played of the game so far. And the thing is, I was thinking about it. So if this were to play out in chronological order, it would most likely not really engage anyone that was playing the game, because you're just doing these things which are essential to developing the character and to telling the story of Jodie Holmes. But they would also be very boring if they were to be made like all in one go, so to speak, because it's a lot about the experiments that they conduct on, well, not really conducts. When I say experiments, I don't mean that like kind of what they did with Wolverine and just like pouring adamantium into his skeleton. No, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about, paranormal experiences, psychic activities, psychic detection activities, where they hold up a card and they tell you, oh, which card am I holding? That kind of stuff. But the fact that it's not in chronological order, because it would just be kind of boring to go through all of those things, it's actually better, and it keeps the story fresh and more engaging, because it's like, oh, right now you're playing the younger version of Jodie Holmes. You're this little girl. You can't really do a whole lot of things, and there's some things that are happening that are beyond your control, and you don't really understand what's happening. And then all of a sudden, you're training in the CIA, okay? And I'm not really going to talk that much more about it, because I think everybody already knows that she kind of trains on the CIA, but I'm not going to say anything else about that. But yeah, basically having these different moments in her life and allowing you to experience them in a different order other than chronological, I think, in my opinion, actually keeps things a lot more fresh and engaging. Also, the game will feature multiple endings. I'm not exactly sure how many. I think I knew back when I did the presentation, but that was just so long ago. I just know the game has multiple endings. So all of the choices that you make throughout the game will eventually lead you on a certain path, which will give you your ending. And different players will most likely achieve different endings because of the choices that they decided to make. And interestingly enough, like I've mentioned when I did the presentation thing, a lot of these choices, you will not even make them consciously. It will just happen naturally. You will just make the choice, and you might not even realize that you just made this really important choice, but it did happen, which I actually find that a little bit fascinating, because, I mean, most games will usually tell you, look, you're about to make this really big choice, whereas it seems that in Beyond Two Souls, it's actually much more of a subtle thing. You just made that choice, and it's done. Now, in the topic of choice, I would like to bring another topic to it, which is the replayability as well. So let's talk a little bit about player choice and replayability. So there is definitely replay value in the fact that you cannot possibly see everything there is to see in the game in one playthrough. That is simply impossible. You're always going to choose something that's going to play out one way or another. So depending on the choices that you make, your gaming experience could be completely different from mine. And here's the thing. There are also certain things which will be common. These are like these events that basically keep the narrative moving forward and are essential to understanding the character and developing the character of Jodie Holmes. And you will notice this if you play the same chapter more than once. And that is one of the reasons why I believe David Cage says you should play it once and be done with it, because once you start going into multiple playthroughs, the game will actually lose its magic. However, for the completionist players out there, most likely there will be a lot of people that will be replaying the game multiple times to explore all the different possible outcomes throughout the story. And I believe that those players will get they will get a lot of hours out of the game, whereas I personally, I only really want to play the game once. I've played some chapters more than once just for the purpose of this playthrough, but I do have to say that the experience is a lot better if you do play it only once. And we have to keep something in mind when I mentioned earlier that some of the events are going to be kind of static and they will always take place regardless of the choices that you make, is that at the end of the day, this is a very narrative-driven game. This is not a sandbox. It's not like you're going to make choices and the game is going to dramatically change. There will be changes to the game according to the choices that you make, but it's not going to be like, oh, so now instead of me actually going to work for the CIA, I actually work for the FBI. You know, it's not going to be anything like that. However, there will be a lot of variations in story, which will still allow each player to have their own experience. Now, there's another point here, which is basically the game doesn't really have a game over. And this is a double-edged sword, because while this might seem like something really cool for a lot of people, where they're like, oh, so there's no game over, so basically you never lose. So they must have made a whole bunch of really branching paths. And yes, there are definitely a lot of branching paths as you make decisions or as you take certain actions in the game. There's definitely a lot of them, but the fact that it is that there's no game over, the problem with that, the problem that I personally had with it, is that I actually replayed one of the chapters and I tried to basically do nothing to see what would happen. How would I be penalized? And I was a little bit disappointed with how that worked out, because even if you don't do anything, some of the fighting sequences will still make your character look like a badass, because, I mean, she will lose the fight, but she will still fight back without you interacting with the game. And I thought that was like, I don't know exactly how I feel about that. And not only she will fight back, she will do like these really cool like martial arts moves without you doing anything as you are taking a beating, because you're actually not interacting at all with the game. And I wasn't, like I said, I was a little bit disappointed with that. And I also felt that the game was basically being a little bit too forgiving, because even if you're constantly failing to take action, like let's say you fail every single I don't really want to call them quick time events, let's say game prompts, because there's kind of a stigma associated with quick time events, and this game is trying to get away from that stigma. So whatever, even if you miss every single prompt that you're supposed to make in a certain sequence, there are so many chances for you to still recover that I was really surprised. Like I thought, look, I mean, you failed once, you failed twice, you failed 3 times in a row. I mean, you got to get punished somehow. And I don't mean punished like game over, but you got to get punished like your character needs to either take a really beating or it needs to basically set you back somehow. But no, like I was failing because like I said, I did it on purpose. I stopped moving. I did nothing. And I just let the game play out to see what would happen. So basically I was in this train sequence and I was failing to open doors. And I was failing to push stuff aside so that I could actually keep on moving forward. I was failing to fight back to fend off the police officers that were after me. And even despite that, I was still being able to outrun them. I was still being able to be ahead of them all the time. I was just like really surprised. I would figure that it would be a little bit more punishing. So it was a little bit too forgiving. And once again, at the end of the day, this game is not really out there to challenge you per se. If anything proved that was when I went and did that sequence, where I basically got no punishment at all for doing nothing. And so again, the game is not out there to challenge you. It's out there to tell you a story, and it's out there to tell you your version of that story. So don't go into this game like expecting a big challenge. Go into this game expecting to experience a story, because that is what they're really going for. And since we're talking on the subject of gameplay, let's go ahead and delve into that a little bit more, shall we? So the gameplay, it's been a very interesting experience for me, since this is basically a first for me in this genre, so to speak. The closest thing I've played to a game like this, so to speak, was kind of like I would have to say probably Uncharted 2. And here's the thing, Uncharted 2 is basically a shooter, but what I mean is that it's also a very cinematic and narrative-driven experience. Actually, not even Uncharted 2. I would even say Last of Us, because Last of Us is even a little bit more narrative-driven than Uncharted 2. But either way, these are two very different games. So as you can see, if I'm saying that the closest thing that I've played to this was one of those titles, it's like you can tell, wow, so you've basically never played anything at all like this, because this game has nothing to do with any of those games. So this has been a very interesting experience for me in terms of experiencing the... Wow, I'm just like words today. But yeah, let's just get down to the nitty-gritty. There's basically no user interface. There's no health gauge. There's no nothing. Your character will, as far as I can tell, never really die. She will get hurt. She will go to the hospital. Things will happen, but she will not really die. So there's no user interface. What will appear on screen every now and then is prompts. And not just prompts, but let's say, for instance, during a fighting sequence, you have to actually interpret what is going on in the fighting sequence. And while that fighting sequence is taking place, they will slow down the action whenever they want you to do something, whenever they want your input on that particular fight. And what you have to do is, when they slow down the action, you have to see which way the whole scene is moving towards. So you have to basically interpret what is your character going to do next, which sometimes is actually a little bit relative. But you have to basically interpret that and then move the right stick in the direction, like for instance, if your character is about to throw a punch, you have to move the right stick in the direction that that punch is being thrown. Or if your character is about to jump over something, you have to move the right stick up. And that is basically how controls work. There's also something... There's also some movement in the game in certain scenes. Not all of the scenes in the game will allow you to move freely, but several scenes throughout the game still allow you to move freely, to kind of still allow you to maintain control of your character in a way. And those scenes where you play out as you would play any other third-person game. Basically, left stick moves your character and your right stick moves the camera. Now, you might say, so... The controls are basically very intuitive, and I believe that they even say that in one of the trailers. And here's the part where I'm going to have to go ahead and disagree with the intuitive part. And the reason for that is the fact that the right stick is used both for camera control and intuitive, not intuitive, is used both for camera control and contextual based action. So for instance, as you come up close to a door, you will flick the right stick to the right, for instance, and that will open the door, assuming that the door is to your right. If the door is to your left, you will flick the right stick to the left, and you will open the door. So this becomes a problem when sometimes you might be in a situation where you just want to look around. However, there might be some context-sensitive action, and you might basically activate that context-sensitive action by mistake, which has actually happened to me. Because here's the thing, since the game blends a lot of blends in between cinematic cutscenes and allowing you to actually control the character, a lot of the times you don't really know if, so am I in control of my character now? Am I not in control of my character? You know, some of the times it's kind of hard to figure out if you are in control of your character or not, or there's just a cutscene playing out. Now, this doesn't happen too often, but especially as you are starting the game, since you are still not, since you still might not be acclimated to what's going on, that might be the case. So what happened to me personally is basically there's this level, chapter even, of the game where you go to a party as a teenager, And so I got to the party, and you guys know me. I like to role play stuff that I would do if I was in the situation. Usually, when I'm playing video games, I like to act as if I was the one in the situation that the main character is. So basically, I get to a party, and this girl offers me a beer. Now, I don't drink in real life, so obviously I say, no, thank you. And so the scene plays out, and eventually they give me control of the character. So the first thing that I think is like, okay, so now I have control of the character. I noticed that I have control of the character, but I didn't notice that there was a contextual thing in the screen, because they're very subtle. There's just like these white dots on screen. So the first thing I did was I wanted to look around the place I was in. So I start moving the camera, and the first thing I do is I mistakenly pick up a beer. Right after I refused that I didn't want it to drink a beer, my character picks up the beer. And then there was no prompt for me to put the beer back down. It's like, nope, now you're going to open this beer and drink it. And I was like, but there's no other choice. I can't put this damn beer down. And that was kind of weird. And then after a while, I moved to a different section of the party, and I go up to this counter, and there's another character there. And he's like, so you want to try this? And I'm looking, and I can't really understand what he's offering me. So I thought he was offering me some food, and I'm like, yeah, sure, I'll try it. And then he passes me, a blunt. You just call those a blunt, right? I don't even know. I'm so awkward with this kind of stuff. It's basically weed. The guy was smoking weed, and he passes me basically a bit of weed. And I grab it, and I'm like, so can I put it down? No, now I got to smoke weed. Great. So I go to this party, and I mistakenly drank a beer and smoked pot. Okay. So, yeah, that's when I started having a little bit of problem with the controls. And the fact that sometimes when you make a mistake, you actually can't go back. There's no like, oh, I'm sorry, I actually didn't want it to smoke this, but whatever. And also, like I said, sometimes it's also hard for you to understand what the game actually wants you to do during a fighting sequence, because there's a fighting sequence happening, right? And your character's doing all these moves and just punching people and kicking people and blocking and stuff, and all of a sudden they slow down. And you have to really look at what she's doing to understand the action, because several times I'm like, okay, so this guy's punching me, so logically what I should do is probably dodge. So I flick away, and it's actually, no, you actually have to parry that blow and counterattack. And a lot of times I got basically caught off guard by those kinds of actions. So I don't know, between QuickTime events and their context-sensitive right stick thing, I don't know which one is the best way to handle those situations. But I almost feel that having the prompt there helps a lot more. But then again, it also takes away from the immersion. So they're trying to go for this thing that's very natural and very visceral even, because it is very satisfying when you're in a fighting sequence and you pull off all the moves, which basically is you correctly interpreting everything that your character is doing during that fighting sequence. It's very satisfactory, because the animations are great. You got some really great animation work in the game, and just watching your character pull off all those karate chops and all that crazy stuff is really cool. But again, the problem comes from the fact that sometimes it's hard for you to interpret, and you're like, oh man, I'm being punished because I couldn't figure out what the hell was going on. But at the end of the day, like I said, the game is so forgiving that you're not really going to have any problems going through these fighting sequences. It's not going to be like, oh, you missed this one attack, that's it, you're dead, it's over. So I don't really think that is going to be a problem. The other thing is, there's also, when we're talking about gameplay, there's also the fact that you will be able to take control of Aiden. For those of you who do not understand what that means, it's basically Aiden is the entity that is connected to Jodie Holmes, and there are certain times where basically there's, you could almost say that they're like puzzle elements, but they're not really puzzles, because I don't know exactly how to describe. That's the thing. The gameplay experience that you're getting within Beyond Two Souls is so unique that it's actually hard to describe. But when you're controlling Aiden, there's this feel that you're actually in control of the game. And I don't know another way to put this, because you will usually feel that you're somewhat in control of the game throughout the different cinematic cutscenes and whatnot, but you will know that you're not in complete control of the game, so to speak. And when you go and you just basically switch to Aiden, because you can switch at any point in time, almost any point in time. There's some points where they don't let you switch to Aiden for whatever reason. As a matter of fact, there are sections in the game which I feel that they've taken a little bit too much control away from you, because I had certain sections where I was in the game and I noticed like, okay, so there's this door here, so I can either try and use Jody Holmes to push through this door, or I can go to Aiden and basically use Aiden to push this thing away. And Aiden, as being a spirit and all, is actually a lot stronger than Jody, and he can usually push stuff away and break glasses and whatnot a lot more efficiently than Jody. And the game still forced me to try with Jody first before allowing me to switch to Aiden. And I was a little bit disappointed, because I was like, when I got to that particular point of the game, I was like, okay, I'll just use Aiden to do this. And I pressed the switch, and they didn't let me switch to Aiden. I was like, oh, man, really? So I go there with Jody, and I try doing it with Jody, and they give me this animation where Jody tries really hard to either open a door or push something inside. I don't remember exactly what it was, but she tries really hard, and she can't do it. And after that, she says, Aiden, help me. And then you can actually switch to Aiden. And I was like, come on, that was obvious. So I don't know. Sometimes the game holds your hand a little bit too much. That's the point that I'm getting at. So basically, it's kind of hard to talk about Beyond Two Souls without mentioning QuickTime events, because a lot of people have this stigma about QuickTime events and Heavy Rain and whatever, despite the fact that, like I said, I've never played Heavy Rain, so I don't know. But a lot of people I've heard saying that, oh my God, Heavy Rain is just a one big QuickTime event. It's boring. As a matter of fact, I think I've said that myself in the past without even playing the game. Hey, I was dumb, okay? Sorry. I have grown since then. Either way, like I said, it's hard to talk about it without mentioning QuickTime events. Yes, there are a lot of sections that will feel just like QuickTime events, despite the fact that instead of you pressing buttons, you'll be flicking the right analog stick to try and mirror whatever movements your character is doing on screen. But again, the thing is, while those seem like QuickTime events and they're not technically QuickTime events, they will still feel like QuickTime events. So a lot of players will still not enjoy that particular experience. But interestingly enough, they also made the game very accessible to non-players, going out of their way to actually allow the game to be controlled by touch-enabled smartphones like your iPhones or Google Android phones or whatever, for those people that are actually not familiar with controllers, because they know that there are actually a lot of people that enjoy watching someone play games like Heavy Rain. So the thing is, because these games are basically like movies, and it's so very hard for me to explain this concept, because this game is almost like watching a movie, right? And watching a movie, a lot of people are going to have that concept that, like, so if it's like watching a movie, you're not really playing a game. But no, that's wrong. You're actually still playing a game, because there's a lot of interactive elements in there. But the thing is, there's these people that like watching the gamers play this particular game because it's so much like a movie, and they like watching movies. So they're trying to get those people to come and play the game as well. And since those people are not familiar with game pads and controllers and stuff like that, they're allowing them to actually play the game via a smartphone. And you can also do this with local co-op. So let's say this is usually the whole boyfriend, girlfriend situation, or your wife or your companion, whatever, in real life. Playing the two of you playing this game, as opposed to one of you just shouting, oh my God, do this, do that, do the other thing. You can actually play the game. And the way that it works, as far as I can understand, because I didn't actually get to try that out yet, it works kind of like a tag team. So one player will control Jody, and then every now and then, whenever you switch to Aiden, another player will control Aiden. So I thought that's a pretty interesting way to go about it. And it's interesting they actually went out of their way to allow for this type of co-op, where a lot of games that are single-player driven would never even think of something like this. They did, which I thought was really interesting. Now, in terms of kind of like a conclusion of the gameplay and how I personally felt about it, because it has been my first experience in this type of game. I personally liked it. I liked the way it worked. I had a couple of issues, like I said, with the fact that the right analog stick controls both camera movement as well as some contextual actions. But I'm still enjoying the overall experience. But I can see why some people wouldn't like it, because a lot of people do not like not being in control of their character. So several people complained about the very long cinematics, for instance, of a game like Metal Gear Solid 4. Those people will most likely not enjoy Beyond Two Souls as much as someone who enjoys that kind of cinematic experience. But at the end of the day, it's more about you experiencing the story and the decisions that you made throughout the story, as opposed to actually bringing you guys challenging gameplay. That is not what this game is going for. And that's kind of a final conclusion to this first impressions, which has actually been pretty long, a lot longer than what I expected. The acting itself in the game is amazing. They have a lot of really talented actors, obviously two actors standing out as Ellen Page and William Dafoe, but there's a lot more talented actors in this game, and you can really tell because the acting is very well done. All of this stuff is motion captured, so it's just really, really good looking. The animations are good. The action on screen is always pretty solid. When you come to terms of when you start talking about the graphics themselves, these are some of the best 720p that I have seen on the PlayStation to date. Like I said, I haven't seen a single pre-rendered cutscene up until this point. Actually, I hadn't said that yet, but I will say it now. I haven't seen a single pre-rendered cutscene up until this point in the game. Everything has been in-engine, and everything has a ridiculous amount of detail. Now, I understand that this is also due to the fact that a lot of these things, there's like a limited amount of control that the player actually has. So they don't really have to put in as they don't really have to. How should I explain this? They don't really have to consider what the player might do as much as other games, so they can afford to just put in more detail, since the player is kind of limited to the amount of actions that he can actually do. But still, it is very, very impressive to look at, and like I said, it is the best I've seen on PlayStation at 720p to date. And I know that some people are probably going to pull The Last of Us into this, and here's the thing: Last of Us is a really great looking game as well, but several of the cutscenes that you see in The Last of Us are pre-rendered cutscenes. And that is the reason why it's not as impressive as with this game, because everything that I've seen up until this point is in-engine cutscenes with ridiculous amounts of detail. Just wanted to throw that out there so that we can understand each other. The animations, like I've already said previously, are rock solid where it counts. Sometimes you will see them cut a few corners here and there. At least I've noticed that. I'm not really going to go into too much detail onto those things, but I've noticed them cut a little bit of a couple of corners in terms of animation detail. But the thing is, these are usually background things, what I'm talking about, like things that most users won't even notice. So we can just say that the animations are looking really, really good. And basically my final conclusion is this is as close as you can get to an interactive movie. And so far, for me personally, has been a very enjoyable experience. Will you enjoy it as well? Look at the footage that you've seen all the way throughout this video in the background. If it looks like something you'd enjoy, most likely you'll enjoy it. I have to say, it's definitely been an eye-opening experience for me because I hadn't played Heavy Rain. I hadn't played any game that was like this. And this game actually makes me want to go back and play Heavy Rain because I've had a really, really great experience with it so far. So anyways, that is going to be it for this particular video. As per usual, leave me your comments, feedback, all that kinds of good stuff in the comment section below. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you guys in the next one.